What makes a true prophet? Is it the fact they are able to perform miracles, or the fact they are able to make prophecies? Lucky for us, we don't need to think that far because the Bible has made it easy for us. The Bible gives us tests for prophethood of prophets, and if we're ever in doubt of a particular prophet, we can always put them to the test. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing today. We are going to be putting Muhammad, the prophet of Islam, to the test, judging based on the biblical criteria of a prophet and also the quranic criteria of a prophet. Now, this video is going to be split into 4 major parts on how we're going to be judging Muhammad today. Basically, we're going to be judging him based on how accurate his prophecies are, and we're going to be using the biblical text Deuteronomy 18:20-22. We're also going to be checking him based on how well he led people to the one true God, how well he taught monotheism, and all the likes. We can also take this verse, our passage from Deuteronomy 13:1-5. Then we have to check one major thing, which is going to be our third assessment for him, is how well he aligns with para revelations. Prophets are meant to align with each other and not to contradict each other. So we are going to check him based on how consistent he is with the para revelations. And lastly, the last test we're going to give for him is going to be coming from the Quran. But we're going to talk more on that when we get to the Quran. But for now, let's look at another thing. Let's not talk more about Muhammad, who he is, and how he got his prophecy. Muhammad is an Arabian man who was born in Mecca, who supposedly got his revelation in the cave of Hira in Mecca. Over there, when he was praying, according to his perspective and the testimony he gave us from the authentic Islamic sources, which we can find in the Sahih Al-Bukhari 692. Obviously, I'm not going to be going through everything, but just want to paraphrase it. Basically, he got his revelation, his first revelation over there in the cave of Hira. That's where he got encountered by a figure, which to him, at first, he did not believe it was an angel, but later on, he admitted or accepted that it was an angel due to the help of his wife Khadija and his uncle Waraka. But initially, he felt like his encounter was with the demonic figure. We're not going to get into that. Basically, that's how Muhammad became a prophet, and years moved by, he became prophet of Islam, established Islam, and gave the revelation of Quran. That's the little bit about Muhammad. Now let's move into the first test of Muhammad. And the first test of our prophet is prophetic accuracy. How many of his prophecies were fulfilled? How many didn't get fulfilled? And we're going to be using Deuteronomy 18:20-22. And basically, I'm just going to paraphrase this. It talks about if a prophet should say anything, it should come true. If at any point in time his prophet makes a statement or a prophecy and it doesn't come true, then that's the red flag that prophet is definitely not from God. So I went online and googled one of Muhammad's prophecies, and one that really caught my eye was the prophecy he made about the Persian Empire and the Roman Empire. Basically, if we should go to Surah 30 and we start reading from Ayah 2-4, it talks about how the Byzantines defeated the Persians, but it later goes on to talk about how the Persians will later conquer their land back. Now, this prophecy actually did take place. The Persians became victorious later on. But what I want us to pay attention to is, in the prophecy Muhammad made, he actually gave a time range. He said this will not happen within 3 to 9 years. Well, after checking the fulfillment of the prophecy, we can find out that the time limit Muhammad did give doesn't really match with what actually happened in the events. Yes, the Persians were later got the land back, but the thing is, the dates, the time range doesn't match. Muhammad had the prediction of 3 to 9 years, but what happened? They got the land back around 12 to 14 years, according to historical documents. This can be categorized as a failed prophecy because it gave a particular time range at which it didn't happen. According to Deuteronomy 18, if the prophets should make prophecies that doesn't come true, then we can categorize him as a fake prophecy. Well, that's one of the prophecies. We can move into many of these prophecies that he made. I'm not going to move much or delve deep into that. But there's another one that really caught my eye, which is Muhammad made a prediction about the last hour. And we can find this in Sahih Muslim 2953b. You can also check 2953b. We're going to be reading from 2953b, which says, Anas bin Malik reported that the person asked Allah's apostle, when will the last hour come? Thereupon Allah's messenger kept quiet for a while and looked at a young boy in his presence belonging to the tribe of Azad Sharim. And he said, if this boy lives, he will not grow very old, till the last hour will come to you. Anas said this boy was of our age during those days. The issue now is the boy is probably dead by now and the last hour has not come. Muhammad made the prophecy about the last hour and it didn't come true. Now, while there have heard quite a lot of reports from Muslims, I'm trying to explain this, but it doesn't really check out. We also have another passage in Sahih Bukhari 116 that Muhammad made a prophecy about the world ending within around 100 days from this time. And if you check Sahih Bukhari 116, it talks about once the prophets led us into Isha prayer during the last days of his life, and after finishing it, he said, do you realize the importance of these nights? Nobody present on the surface of the earth tonight will be living after the completion of 100 years from that night. From this, we can really tell that Muhammad did really think that the world was going to end soon. First, with the prophecy he made about a boy not living very old before he see the last hour, and with this prophecy immediately about the world ending in 100 years to come. So Muhammad did not really think the world was going to last longer than that. Well, this is over 1,000 years later and the world hasn't dead. We can also categorize this as a fake prophecy. So our first text of a prophet, which is how accurate Muhammad's prophecy is, can be categorized as a fake one. Moving on to the second one, leading others to one God. Now, according to the Islamic paradigm, Muhammad did do that because he taught strict monotheism according to our Muslim brethren, and he also led people to God. Well, under careful examination, we can bet to differ that the Quran doesn't actually teach strict monotheism. We have verses in the Quran that talks about multiple creators alongside God, Allah. Then we also have verses that talks about maybe other people having the ability to create life. So the idea of strict monotheism is actually a very shaky one. Just to look at that, the God Muhammad introduced, Allah, is actually the concept of that God is different from what we revealed in the previous revelations by the previous prophets. For example, we have in many scenarios where the previous prophets were able to relate, or the relationship they had with God was that of a father to a son or to a daughter type of relationship. But Muhammad completely debunks that and destroys that and says the relationship you can only have with God is of that of a slave to a master. Basically, Muhammad introduced a type of God that was not really understood by the previous prophet and previous revelation. So can we really say he really led people to the one true God if his concept of God differs with that of previous prophets? Well, according to this test, I will count it as a no. He wasn't really leading people to the God prophesied by the previous prophets, or God that was taught by the previous prophet, the concept of God that was taught in the previous prophet, by the previous prophet. Rather, he was bringing his own new concept of God in the Quran. Let's move on to the third prophecy about Muhammad, the consistency with prior revelations. You can check this in Isaiah 8:20, and you can also check it in Galatians 1:8. Basically, a prophet must align with what came before it. Prophets cannot contradict each other. Why? Because they all claim they are getting the revelation from God. So if they all get the revelation from God, God cannot contradict himself, which means each and every single prophet, their revelation and their prophecies must align with everything they teach. It must align and be on a single trail. If at any point in time it contradicts, there is a problem. And we can find this in the Quran. Muhammad contradicts a lot of the teachings of the previous prophets, from Jesus to Moses and many other prophets in the previous scriptures. Muhammad contradicts a lot of their teachings, and he changes a lot of historical facts that contradicts what the previous prophets have taught. So Muhammad doesn't only fail this test of the prophets very poorly, but the fact he contradicts it is actually a very big issue for us to have the red flag that this man, Muhammad, could possibly not be a prophet of God. Now, on to the last test of a prophet. We move to the Quran, and we are going to be picking our text from Quran 69. We can start reading from the 43 verse, and it's basically saying, and I read, "It is a revelation from the Lord of all worlds. Had the messenger made up something in our name, we would have certainly seized him by his right hand and severed his aorta, and none of you could have shielded him from us." Basically, in this passage in the Quran, it talks about if the prophet Muhammad had made up revelations, or basically it was the false prophet, the Lord would have taken him by his right hand and severed his aorta. That's the way he would have killed him. Well, it's how convenient that one of Muhammad's last dying words was him dying, him feeling his aorta has been cut. If you can check this in Sahih Bukhari 4428. The prophet, in his ailments in which he died, used to say, "O Aisha, I feel the pain caused by the food I ate as Kaiba, and at this time I feel as if my aorta is being caused from the poison I ate." Basically, how come Muhammad claimed the pain he's feeling on his death wish, on his dying bed, is exactly in line with how God said he would kill him if he was a false prophet. This is the obvious false prophet I've ever seen. The prophets, the text given by the Quran that he was going to die, the way he was going to die, it was making up fake prophecies or making up revelations. That's exactly the way Muhammad died, according to authentic Islamic sources. What other proofs do we need to be able to classify Muhammad as nothing else than a false prophet and doesn't align with the previous prophets? Well, I'm checking through every single test we've given him based on how accurate his prophecies were, how he led people to God, his consistency with his previous revelation, and also the prophets on how he would die if he was a false prophet according to the Quran. Muhammad fails every single one of these prophets and checks the last one confidently. This is more than enough proof that Muhammad was nothing but a false prophet and should not be taken seriously. If you find this video helpful, please leave a like, share, subscribe to this video.